I want to introduce someone really special who can, I think, tie all this together and really bring it home. Everything that you've heard me talk about was, in a way, theoretical. It was work that was being done in a lab. But at the end of the day, there are all of us, patients, who are the recipients of these advances and the therapies that are developed. And I think it's really important at the end of the day to remember that we're not doing this for an academic exercise. We're not doing this because it's interesting. We're doing this because it matters to our health and because it has the potential to change the trajectory of our disease. So I want to introduce someone who many of you know or know of, who you heard me mention earlier, Dr. Bill Dorland. Many of you may not know that in addition to being a survivor of Chordoma, Bill is a physics professor and at University of Maryland. I think many of you who have interacted with Bill probably know and can verify that his brilliance in physics is probably only surpassed by his caring for this community. And I have to say that I was a beneficiary of that when I was first diagnosed. Bill was one of the first people who my mom and I reached out to and provided an enormous amount of guidance and support and really made those early days much less scary and daunting. And Bill has played just a pivotal role throughout the history of this organization, was there in the founding group, that founding meeting. And in addition to helping to provide the impetus to get the foundation off the ground, I think Bill certainly deserves credit for encouraging us to do meetings like this. In fact, the very first community conference that we ever had, Bill really led the charge in encouraging and supporting us to do it. And not only that, but paid for it. And really set a model and a template that we've learned from and replicated and now taken across the world. So, Bill, we owe you a lot, and want to say thank you and welcome.
Can we have your mission slide as the backup? Do you know how to do that? So it's really not fair to have to follow Josh. That's it. Yeah. It's, how do we unblank it? Good. And so, it's impossible to follow Josh, and so I'm not going to try to match his eloquence or his passion. I made some notes about what I was asked to cover, and it's true that I was very passionate about having meetings like this, and I remain passionate about it. But I've been away for a little while, partly because of health reasons, and so when you come back to a meeting like this, you want to say way too much. So I'd like to say thank you and hello and shout outs to about everyone in the room. Let's just do that all at once. Okay, great. In particular, I want to thank Heather, who's here, and Simone, who's not, and Josh. Okay. So my story is one that is complicated like everyone else in the room. And so rather than thank lots and lots and lots of doctors, because I'm going to go over my history and you'll hear that it's as complicated as yours. You can't thank everybody, but there's some people here in this room who I've been treated by. And so I also want to thank basically Memorial Sloan Kettering and Dr. Yamada and Dr. Boland have played critical roles in my care over the last 11 years. The other thing I want to say is I've been treated at many different institutions, and in terms of commercial or hospitals, it's really quite amazing the financial model here at Sloan Kettering. If you haven't been treated here, you come in, you go through an initial discussion, and then you never have to talk about money again. It's really fabulous. Completely different than my treatments at other hospitals. So I think that's a marker that it's worth calling out. Okay, so let me do my story real quick. I want to do it in the context of the Chordoma Foundation. I'm going to go over my health story and then wrap back to the role of the foundation and all of that. But these two prongs of the mission of the Chordoma Foundation are incredibly important. The leading the search for a cure and also trying to improve the lives of those of us who are affected by the disease. And, you know, it's those are in tension when you have finite resources, and it's hard to keep that balance, and it's hard to plan for the future in ways that pay appropriate attention to both sides of what's needed. And I'm really proud that the foundation has done an extraordinary job, in my opinion, of keeping that balance in good shape. There were times when, I have to say, I was saying that we needed to spend more time on improving the lives of those affected and less time on looking for a cure. And I was completely wrong. So let's just get that out. So the story will make that clear. Okay, so my story, I'm going to go fast because we don't have a lot of minutes. And you've heard all these stories before. I had a giant sacral chordoma diagnosed when I was 38 years old in 2004. I sought multiple opinions. I did that at Hopkins, where I live. I live in Baltimore. Johns Hopkins, Memorial Sloan Kettering, and Mass General. I decided on block resection with no radiation. At the time, that was the gold standard. I had an extraordinarily good surgery, great margins, fantastic surgical team. Everything went the way it was supposed to, and as you heard this morning, that's not enough. Had great margins, everything was fine, and yet I had a multiple recurrence with lots of tumors within 6 weeks. In retrospect, they really showed up a few months later in an obvious way. And so, great, what do you do? I again sought multiple opinions and went with, again, on-block resection, this time with pre-radiation. We had planned intraoperative radiation and post-operative radiation. We couldn't do the intraoperative because the geometry or something wasn't right, but I did the pre-radiation and the on-block resection at Mass General this time because I was looking for that intraoperative possibility, and I followed that with proton radiation therapy in 2006. The goal there was, you know the goals. So the hope was that that would last a good long time. And for those of you that have quick, aggressive recurrences, you know, this is the part of the community where things are very challenging. So I didn't have a strong opinion about where it was all going, but had a lot of hope. In 2008, had another recurrence, another on-block resection, another recurrence in 2011. This time, the recommendation was surgery wouldn't work, but we could do high-dose radiation. But I was a low-priority patient because this thing was tiny, slowly growing, not affecting anything. So I kind of, the wait-and-watch model, right? We've all done wait-and-watch. That was the right thing to do for that tumor. I waited and watched. It wasn't a problem. But while we were waiting, another tumor came up. And so now I had two large, at the key point, I had two large tumors on my spine. And that's when the doctors at all the hospitals said, there's nothing more that we can recommend for you at this time. So I expanded my search and went to MD Anderson and some other hospitals. They also declined to intervene. So what do you do then? Well, that's part of my story. I started looking at experimental trials, and as Hans told you about yesterday, this is a really exciting part of the story, and it's incredibly hopeful at this time. The first trial I engaged in was at Johns Hopkins University, and it's a trial where they use live bacteria which thrive in a tumor environment. And I was going to be injected into the bloodstream with live bacteria, which is a dangerous thing to do in a certain sense. And those bacteria would hopefully go gobble up the tumors. It was an exciting moment. My hero in all of cancer research is a fellow at Johns Hopkins named Bert Vogelstein. He's kind of one of the big thinkers. And he actually came and administered the dose himself because it was his trial. And, you know, he's like me. He was wearing jeans and a T-shirt and all that kind of stuff, so I could relate to this guy. That was cool. That trial didn't work out. Partly Hurricane Sandy interrupted it. Can you believe? Destroyed all of the bacteria. They were kept in a refrigerator up here near New York. Anyway, the second trial was here at Sloan Kettering with Dr. Yamada, and it was high-dose stereotactic radiation. And the idea was I had 2 tumors. Each one got 3 doses. In one case, it was 10 gray each time. In the other, it was 12 gray each time. These were tumors in a place, it was recurrence, not nothing else. So they were in the area where it had already been radiated, and so the risk to the surrounding tissues and organs was high. And so we did something called moving the organs out of the way. There was some technical term for it. But that was really quite remarkable. They actually move all the organs out of the way, apply the radiation. That felt great. And so the hope there was that it would arrest the growth of these 2 tumors. And chordomas are slow, so it's hard to know whether that was paying off, because I immediately went on to a 3rd trial at NIH. And here's where the foundation had kind of fed back into everything I was doing in a really poignant way. The trial that was going on at NIH was one where they were looking at fortifying or alerting your immune system to the existence of excess brachyury, and basically developing an immune response to brachy or brachyury, whichever way we say it. And it was not for chordoma patients. And it was being run by a team, and one of the members of the team was from Duke University. And Josh knows that there are a high correlation between brachyury expression and tumor growth in chordoma patients. And he used his alumni connections to talk to the guy running the trial and got them to open a few seats after the trial had closed to let some chordoma patients in, because it looked like a high-value sort of opportunity for this particular strategy. I don't know how many of us there were, let's say 10. And again, chordomas grow slowly, so it's hard to say whether that therapy was having a big effect for most of us. Most of the patients, at least the ones that I've met, and I think one of you's here, and I haven't seen you yet, Tiffany. Anyway, most of us had no effect. The tumors did not shrink, and they didn't continue to grow. But in my case, one of the tumors disappeared very quickly, and the other shrank radically. And so, wow, that was kind of exciting. And they continued to watch me. This started in July of 13, continued to watch. The other patients in the trial did not have that response. I was having that strong response. Long story short, it turns out the interaction of radiation with the brachyury immune system therapy seems to be very, very exciting. Another patient went through the same sequence. Great. How do you turn it off? Went through the same sequence, but it was interesting because this was a patient who did not have radiation, did have 2 tumors, started the brachyury trial, and like the other patients, did not observe any change in the tumors. Radiated 1 tumor. Remember, he's now got the immune system response. That tumor shrinks. Irradiated the second tumor, and that one shrank. So it's very exciting to see that controls for a lot of things, if you think about it. It's very exciting kind of progress. And, I think that without the research knowledge that was developed as a result of the Chordoma Foundation's fanning the flames, Dr. Flanagan in England was probably going to do some of that research anyway, but would anybody have known that research had happened, and would there be connections to people doing trials and opening trials to chordoma patients? In other words, some of the great things that come out of the Chordoma Foundation are the direct funding of research, but those development of relationships and dissemination of knowledge is also very important, and at least in my case, has played the critical role. So, these things have their toll. I wore my shorts so you could see I have to have a foot brace now. That's because I developed foot drop as a result of the radiation. And it's also, my wife says I have to yodel when I wear this outfit. So she doesn't think the shorts go with the socks. My idea is that these socks, which I got at CVS, hide, you can't even see that there's a brace there. You've probably all seen it. But anyway, looking down, I can't see it. It's great. My story here at the end is that the technology exists to kind of ameliorate a lot of the problems when you're searching for a cure. So, I've got failing kidneys, failing digestive system. I've lost some organs. I can't walk properly. It's an 11-year journey, but I'm okay. My head's still fine. I'm raising a beautiful daughter who's 18. And the two prongs of the mission, neither one makes sense alone. You have to have hope, and you also have to take care of people, take care of us, right? We the patients. And if you're new, if this is your first Chordoma Foundation meeting, I just want you to know it was a bunch of patients. We are a bunch of patients. It's not it is a professional organization, but at the same time, it's not. We're a patient organization. We came together. We did this stuff, and we want to do more of this stuff. And we can enable the great doctors. We can enable the great scientists. And I'm just glad to see all of you here. The idea for me behind these meetings was to promote discussion among patients, because patients can change the world just like everybody else can. So I hope that while you're here, you meet lots of new people, talk to all of us. Let's all get to know each other, share our stories, because helps to carry the burden, but it also opens new directions for new opportunities. So thanks for coming.